It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, July 29th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that's talking long term contracts.
I don't know. I don't want to think about anything more than today.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit fanduel.com/locked on to get started. You can find us on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, though, we did have a special episode last week dealing with the Travis Konecny contract extension. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and do so. We are in our August programming schedule. I know it's July 29th, but it's going to be August this week.
Before you know it.
I know. So this month we're doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll have our Nemesis and new poll as always because it's a Monday show. So we'll get to that later. Because it is essentially August, there isn't much going on. And so we had a post from Tony from Inside AHL Hockey, just, giving some color to the situation about Alexei Kolosov and why he might not return this upcoming season, saying that he felt isolated and there wasn't anybody to help him language support wise. And we have talked multiple times about how they didn't play him as much as they should have, and especially so in the playoffs. So, there's been rumors circulating around and, him practicing with Dynamo Minsk and all of that, suggesting that he won't return. But we don't really have anything new. This is just adding some color to that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, Tony got it from his agent or something. And um, the only thing I could identify or relate to with this is I've gone on like work assignments where, you're in a hotel indefinitely 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It keeps getting extended, and yeah, if you don't know anybody in town or whatever, you gotta like it becomes a long 24-hour cycle. It doesn't matter that the hotel is connected to the arena. It doesn't matter that this is a four-star hotel. You're still alone. And that's something that I think rang true with me. And I think that's the part of it that we were kind of wondering, and now we know.
Yeah, and I think, it's very clear that something was amiss, and
Hmm.
there's a reason why these rumors started in terms of him, not returning this upcoming season. And I think, should that officially come to fruition, I think it's something the Flyers need to look at and do some self-reflection in terms
Yeah,
of
we
how
talked
they
about
could
it
have support
recently.
him better. Yeah,
Yeah, we talked about it
we did.
recently. Something you could do for all incoming new prospects and otherwise to kind of get them situated. I think they should listen to it.
Yeah, I think so too. But moving on to our long term contracts discussion, because of the 8-year deal that Travis Konecny just signed, you look at the Flyers and they really only have four guys signed long term right now. There's a couple honorable mentions, which we'll get into. And Travis Konecny is the latest 8.75 million through 2033. We're now in year -1 of 8 because of the last year of his previous contract coming up this season. And earlier this season, we saw Owen Tippett get an 8-year deal, which will start this year. And that is through 2032. Then we have Travis Sanheim, who's in year 2 of 8 through 2031. And then we have Sean Couturier, who's in year 3 of 8, signed through 2030. So just given like the kind of players that you give long-term contracts to, like, does this feel right?
Well, it doesn't, but it's because of accounting. Because the Flyers have decided we're going to give out 8 years to always keep the AAV down and kind of squeeze more players into it. That's their organizational philosophy.
Yeah.
So
Well, that much is certain based on the fact that all these guys have 8-year
pretty
deals,
obvious,
right?
right? So that's the thing. It's like they're not saving it necessarily for always their best players. They're saving it for that next contract that they know there's a player they want to keep, and that's the way they can keep them. I would say, as far as like when you're looking in the future for core pieces, they decided, hey, Owen Tippett's going to be a core piece. Okay, that's fine. He's young. Sanheim too, fine. The other two with Konecny, Couturier preceded him, and yeah, they inherit. This was inherited, so fine. You forget about that one. And Konecny, we've talked about it. Where so now with Konecny and Couturier, the timeline may not match up. The timeline may only be a couple of years where they're kind of like a playoff contending team, and then maybe they start falling off and other things have to happen. That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, things have changed a lot in the NHL, where in the past you were able to sign 12-year deals and
Right.
9-year deals. And, like Briz got a 9-year deal and the Flyers are still paying him for it. Jeff Carter got an 11-year deal. Mike Richards got that 12-year deal, which was the longest deal prior, to the changes in the
Yes.
CBA, where we have an 8-year max for re-signs and a 7-year max for free agent signings, right? So it is a different landscape for sure. But I think it is interesting, your point about how they're just kind of looking at the next contract that's coming up and doing what's best for that player that they want to keep. And because you look at this and they have one defenseman and three forwards signed to these long term deals here, right? And I feel like Travis Sanheim to me is a no-brainer that you give a long-term deal to because he is a mainstay on
Hmm.
this Flyers blue line. He's somebody we wanted to keep around. Although there was, he went from on the trading block to 8-year deal. So there
Right.
was something to it, but the Flyers were in more of a blow it up potentially kind of mode at that time because that contract was signed right as we were approaching the beginning of the 22-23 season, right?
Hmm.
Where we were still in a maybe we're going to blow it up. They couldn't find the right deal for him, so let's just sign him, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how that went down. But there's really nobody else that's a top flight defenseman right now until Cam York's up for his deal, right? So it, it's it's just one of those things where it feels like every team has a top flight defenseman signed long term. Travis Sanheim is that guy for the Flyers.
Yeah. The only one that I would sandwich in between is they did give Ristolainen 5 years too when he was healthy.
Right.
So that's the
So,
tricky one. That's a tricky one too because the team did give that one out. It was previous administration. It's not 8 years, but they still gave him 5. And honestly, now the 5 don't look so good. At the time, it didn't seem terrible, but
mhm.
again, based on injuries and such, it's kind of the way it's turned out a little bit.
Yeah. And I wasn't necessarily going to include him in this conversation just because the expiration of that contract is much sooner
Yeah.
than everybody else. So I was kind of going in reverse order of expiration of deal. So he would have
Okay.
been next on my list for
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the scenario there, but just in terms of who's locked down for the longest here. And I think, when you look at the forwards, I think it does make sense who they've given these long-term deals to with Couturier, Tippett, and Konechny. I think
Hmm.
like it's just that it doesn't account as much for what's coming down the road, right?
Right. I mean, should I do I think they should have given something more long term to Morgan Frost? I do. And I think he is a long term core piece. May not happen, but that's what I think he is. And so I
Right.
think he should be a part of this. And he may be in another, was it 2 years, I guess. So, or another year, I forget his contract. But he may be. So
Hmm.
he's the only other guy right now, as far as a young player, that I feel like would be a part of this grouping. And honestly, it's simply because he would be the heir apparent to Couturier being the 1C, because Couturier is no longer a 1C.
Right. And that's kind of where we're at here with the contracts made sense at the time. 8-year
Hmm.
deals is the organizational MO. And if you're going to give these deals to anybody, these are the guys to give it to. But we're going to talk more about that strategy and what's coming down the pike, as well as those honorable mentions coming up next.
I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. And now we're in full swing for summer sports like baseball. We absolutely miss hockey, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, including all every day, all summer long. FanDuel has odds for Major League Baseball, the Paris games with over-unders on medal counts by country, soccer, and so much more. Keep an eye on the trading deadline. That'll be interesting for baseball betting. So head over to fanduel.com/locked on and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
We will be having our usual mailbag segment on Wednesday, so make sure to get those questions in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail, send us a message on Twitter, or comment on our YouTube channel. Looking more at these particular contracts, we've talked about the Couturier contract, that it made sense at the time, and we are in year 3 of 8. This is the contract we're furthest along in as far as any of these guys. It was signed in the off season, tail end of the off season in 2021. So again, I think like there was a question then, but less so about his health. It was just the term and what this team was going to be then. But it just felt like of anybody, Sean Couturier deserved that deal, and it
Mhm.
was the 7.75 million. So, and he's again under contract through 2030, which still is pretty far off, though.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, let's be real. He's not gonna play out that contract. He's not.
no, he's not. And I think that's what's weird about all this is like players sign these deals, and I would say other than Owen Tippett and Travis Sanheim, I think are the 2 that are more likely to play out these deals, right?
Yeah, and still be at a good level. I agree. I'll tell
Yeah,
you the other problem with the way these signings are, and this is based on like team structure. So when Sean Couturier signed it, he's a clear 1C. Like I said, I think you still have to look at Frost as a future 1C, even if he never becomes that. But the
and
problem
he's
is
got 1 more year, this
one
upcoming
more.
year, and then he's got another RFA
Right. So they
situation.
may bridge him again.
Yeah,
Uh So then you're looking at Nick Seeler, who's playing higher than he'd be playing if it were a playoff team too. And so, like, some of these guys, like Owen Tippett, is almost getting paid like a top liner, not quite, but he's not really a top line guy either. He's really a second line guy. So the problem is you end up with a bunch of second line guys on offense or worse, and bunch of like twos, threes, and fours, but don't have a number one on defense. Not saying you can't win that way, because there are teams that disguise that too. Zibanejad is not a true number one center for the Rangers, but he's been playing it. And you can find these situations around the league, but the problem is at some point you're hoping that the guys that you're drafting are going to actually play those actual spots. Like even Cam York, the hope was, hey, he's a true number one. Well, he's not. Now the hope is
right,
he's a two. If he's a two, okay, that's fine. If he's a three, then it's like, all right, well, there's a little bit of a miss here. Still a good player,
right.
but that's where they slot in is important too.
Sure, and York's gonna sign his bridge deal next offseason,
Right.
right? So, that's just kind of the way things are going here. And so we talk about, these lower level players that are kind of outperforming themselves and getting contracts. Nick Sealer, love him, love what he does for the role that he is. And his AAV is not terrible at all. It's 2.7, but
Mm,
it is that 4-year deal,
yeah.
right? And so he signed through 2028. And I think where I have the issue with this contract is relative to when this team should peak and they shouldn't need him anymore. And for a guy that isn't a long term commitment like Travis Sanheim on the blue line, that's where it didn't make sense to me. So he's under contract through 2028, which is, I think, just a year or two longer than he
It
should
could
be.
be 2 years too long. You just
Yeah.
watching guys like Dan Girardi in the NHL, guys who are supreme shot blockers, they just don't last when they're starting to block all those shots. Playing in a torch system, that's what happens. There's somebody
Right.
that has to step up and block all these shots. He's getting paid for it. Like he probably never would have gotten this salary without John, but it's not going to help his longevity either. So there's that give and take.
Right. And I think, the timing of the signings are what's also confusing to me. So Owen Tippett, we thought he was going to have to be in negotiations. They signed him in January. Love it. Think that's great. Lock it down. 6.2 for a top six forward makes sense, right?
Yep.
But then they signed Nick Sealer in March, which to me, that's a no-brainer to wait till the off season for. And
Right.
at the time, they said, "Oh, we just want to show our support for him and our confidence in him." I think for Nick Sealer, you can still do that by signing him at the end of the season and figuring out where your money problems lie. Like, did they know they were going to buy out Cam Atkinson at that point and have additional dead cap space? Like, did did we know anything? Did we know our goaltending situation for
I think a
next
lot of it was
season?
fluid. I think there was guessing
Yeah.
going on here. I do.
Yeah, and that's where I don't necessarily dislike the player, like Nick Sealer, like what he
Hmm.
does again,
Hmm.
but I just don't like the timing of this deal and the length of this deal. And it's not a long-term, 8-year deal, but for a guy like Nick Sealer, 4 years is a long-term deal.
It is. I mean, again, I would have just kept going year by year, and if you'd have lost him because someone gave him to, I could turn Adam
Okay.
Jennings, I could turn him into a shot blocker. I can,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he would gladly do it, and he'd be a lot less money.
Yeah, that's the thing is Nick Sealer's replaceable. And
Right,
I'm sorry to say it that way, but he's ultimately
but you have to look at it
replaceable.
that way. Like,
Yeah, and that's why you don't sign him for that long.
right?
So the other next in line in terms of long-term contract, although it's a mid-year contract, is Joel Farabee. So Sealer signed through 2028. Joel Farabee is also signed through 2028. He signed his deal a couple of years earlier than that. We're currently in year 3 of 6 of his deal. And I think, the 5 million for Farabee was a good deal at the time. And I think it continues to be a good deal because I think not only is he a useful member of this team, but I think that deal is tradable if it comes down to it.
It is. It was a good deal. It still is a good deal. And let's face it, he had to overcome the disc replacement, which at the time was a risky
Yeah.
operation. We didn't know about it until we saw Eichel sort of show the results first, and it did affect Farabee a little bit. Uh, but yeah, I mean, again, the perception is Joel Farabee had a bad year with like 50 points, and Owen Tippett had a great year with like 52 points. Like that's the perception out there. And I don't get it, but it's probably going to get Farabee traded, and I'm not sure that's the right thing to do either, by the way.
Well, I don't think so either, but I do think that that makes this deal an actual like rare gem. I think where it was
Yeah.
a 6-year deal for a good cap hit for a good player that you can either keep or trade. I like Joel Farabee's contract is one of the best deals I think that
Yes.
the Flyers have done.
No question. Can't argue it. And I think it's 100% on the money. Like it just is.
So like figuring out where all this looks toward the future then with the guys that we're going to have to re-sign moving forward. I think that again, the Flyers have done a pretty solid job of locking up the guys they want to lock up to the point where, again, Morgan Frost is an RFA next year. Noah Cates will be an RFA again next year. You're looking at nobody of consequence who's going to be a UFA at the end of next season. Nobody.
Right.
And I just find that really interesting because I think that, when with these bridge deals that you're going to have to sign with, Morgan Frost, we're going to see what happens with Noah Cates this season if they want to
Hmm.
keep him around. And then you have Tyson Forster. I think it's Morgan Frost and Tyson Forster that are they going to give Forster a big deal or are they going to give him a bridge deal? That's a
Yeah,
big
that's
question for me.
that's a big question. That'll matter a lot this year. The elephant in the room is so Scott Lawton. Um, I'm going to hear people that say, "Well, he's just 29, but he's played heavy minutes." Let's face it. And I think where he got that 43 points was a absolute career year. Everything worked right. There was the opportunity there. He was team leader and he stepped up and he really did it. And last year his points dropped a little bit. And I think they're going to drop again. And I think this is what Scott Lawton is. And it's not bad, but I think the
No.
Flyers have at least correctly identified, hey, we're not going to give him 8 years to keep him around because he's a good guy. Because he might play another, he won't play 8, but he might play another 6. But the point
Right.
is, what's he going to be in those 6 years? He's a team leader. That's fine, but the points are going to dwindle. They're going to, keep going down most likely. And so, they're making the right decision with him, even though it's a tough decision.
Yeah, I agree. And he also has one additional year left on his
Right.
contract. So it's not like he's up after next year. It's the
No,
year
but
after that.
ideally, you should probably trade him at the deadline this year. If you
Sure.
don't, it's a
I think,
mistake.
yeah, I mean, I don't want them to trade him. Let's, be 100% transparent here. I love him. I don't want him going anywhere, at least for that one more year. Right. But I do think if there's the right deal, and they've been transparent about that they haven't
Yeah.
found the right deal for him, that
Yeah. And
they're
it
willing
doesn't
to
have to
give
be
up.
him alone. It might be him and
Yeah.
Farabee. That's
Yeah.
the thing. It's just, you have to look at it and he might be a part of a deal.
Yeah, but this all ties into these long-term contracts and what the Flyers are going to do. And, like I said, with the RFAs up next season with Morgan Frost and Tyson Forster and those decisions that have to be made, there's going to be some sacrifices here. And it'll be interesting to see how it kind of adds to the flow of these existing long-term contracts that we've
Yeah. I
already
mean,
talked
look,
about.
Scott Lawton would like to finish his career in Philly. There's no question. But like Philly can offer him and say, look, we got to pay you like 2 million bucks, or you got to just go somewhere else and make your money. You want to stay here, we'll pay you the stay here price. That's fine.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll offer that to him. But again, most agents won't let a player take something like that.
No, I agree. Well, to be continued. It's an interesting topic for sure, and a big picture topic that we hope the Flyers are paying just as much attention to as we are. Certainly. In the meantime, it is Monday, so we will have our new poll this week related to the topic we just discussed and our new nemesis of the week coming up next. All right. So we've just been talking about these long term contracts that the Flyers have in place right now. And our question to you is which of these deals will turn out best for the Flyers in the long run? So we have Travis Sanheim, Travis Konecny, Owen Tippett, and Sean Couturier. We're leaving the honorable mentions on the side for now. We've
Right.
got those four choices. So it's Sanheim,
Tough
Konecny,
one.
Tippett, and Couturier. I know. I know it is a real tough one. So can't wait to hear what our listeners think about it and talk about it on the Friday show. So you've got until about Thursday morning to get your votes in. Link in the show notes. It's over on our YouTube channel. Moving over to our nemesis of the week, man, it absolutely came to fruition last week when we talked about having summer surprises as our nemesis of the week. We had Mitchkoff come over and all of that, which we talked about on our Thursday show last week. Then we had the Travis Konecny contract come in, which we had our bonus episode for. And I think that I don't want this to happen again. So I'm trying not to manifest anything into the world. But my nemesis this week is making something out of nothing. And it's kind of related to the Kolosov conversation, just because I feel like there wasn't something new that came out of this. It was just, adding some context to a situation that we already kind of knew what was going on with. Again, nothing official yet, but I think, given that it's August and talked about that at the top of the show, there's a lot of empty space to fill with things. And I just don't want us to make something out of nothing. And so that is my nemesis this week, that let's just be calm about everything and let's wait for actual information to come in. We don't even have official contract signings from the Phantoms, even though we generally know who they are and who the AHL deals are. Nothing official has come through the channels of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms yet on any of this. So let's wait until we get some official stuff to react to.
That's fair. So here's my my nemesis, and it's going to involve NBC and the Olympics. So two things. The first thing is when they were announcing countries, and I watched all of it for about 30 minutes. I was actually shocked they had the Minions in the opening, because I'm like, really? I love the Minions, but I'm like, I don't think this is the place for it, but whatever. But when I saw they had a country like Iran go through, and then Mike Tirico is like explaining the diplomatic situation between the US and Iran, that is not what you're supposed to do for the Olympics. I'm sorry. That is supposed to stay out of it. We're all supposed to be equal for that. We're trying to create good feelings here. And I just feel like that didn't do it. Right. And then I'm surprised because I find out for the coverage. And look, I'm happy Catherine Tappan's in studio. I think she's great. The fact that they got her back, she's terrific. Peyton Manning and Snoop Dogg. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, Peyton Manning's just not that good. He's okay. And Snoop Dogg, like, what is he really going to add to Olympic coverage? Like, it's
You
just,
are no fun, Russ.
you know
I
what?
will just
Do I,
say it.
do, okay. Do you want to have fun, or you want this to be just like a big yuckity yuck when people are spending their whole
For the
lives?
opening ceremony,
No,
I want the fun.
no, they're there for everything. Snoop Dogg and Peyton Manning are there. Like, they're going to be doing other stuff. And,
They're not going to be doing heavy hitting analysis. They're going to be doing like human interest stories. Kelly Clarkson's there too, and she's a huge sports fan. These people, like, I think it's fun to have different kind of personalities. It's like when Leslie Jones was doing her commentary.
I'm
It was
sorry.
fun.
Snoop
It
Dogg
was
has nothing
Homer.
to add to this unless he's going to talk about things he knows about, and you know what I mean. So he has nothing to add to this. Peyton Manning, sure, great football player, has interviewed some people in other things, but again, I want people who are used to doing Olympic coverage. There is something to it. There's an art form to it. These aren't the people. Sorry.
I respectfully disagree.
It's
I think
okay.
it's fun to have different kinds of people covering it. Like I said, Snoop and Kelly Clarkson and people like them are not going to be talking about the sports in specificity and not giving the analysis. They have their regular commentators for that. They're going to go to the stands, they're going to interview the families, they're going to do that stuff. And I think it's great. And I think you are probably unfamiliar with a lot of what Snoop has been doing in
Oh
terms
no,
of
I
the
am familiar.
variety of stuff.
I'm
And
familiar, and I'm
I think it's
unimpressed.
fun.
And I'm unimpressed. We'll just say it that
Well,
way.
okay. I just think you gotta like loosen up a little bit and have
I
some fun with this.
If they had the right people, I would loosen up and have fun. I just don't think these are the right people. That's all.
Also, like, I watched the entirety of the opening ceremonies and I watched it live, and it was tremendous. I
Okay,
think
explain one
there's
thing. In a
there's some things I could critique about it to tweak it, to make it better, but overall, they did a tremendous job, and I wept like a baby with Celine Dion was singing, like,
Yeah, I didn't get to Celine Dion. That's great.
mm.
Should there have been a woman in a sleeveless dress in a terrible rainstorm on top of a building? You think they maybe should have changed that up? That just seemed ridiculous.
This is a rain or shine thing,
All
and,
right.
I
Again, it just seemed dumb.
I mean, I'm felt for the athletes being out in the rain, and I was
Yeah.
concerned for them. But, as far as the performers, that it is what it is, and that's what you sign up for. But I think they're doing a good job, and I think there's some fun to it that maybe you're missing out on. And I'm
Mhm.
going to continue to have all the fun, and you can just not watch, and that's okay. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday, like I said, with that mailbag. So get your questions in on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. Email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day, everyone.